Welcome to the StoryWorks Reading Series, a podcast for readers, writers, and readers curious about writers. I'm your host, Alita Winternheimer. Today on the StoryWorks Reading Series, I am thrilled to bring you Selene Castrovilla. She has published across multiple genres for children and adults. She's a remarkable writer. I think you're going to love her short story, and we get into all kinds of stuff in our conversation. I really think you're going to enjoy this one, so give it a listen. And by the way, Selene loves to hear from her readers. So make sure after you listen to this episode, you reach out to her on social media or through her website. We will give you that link during the show and, of course, link to it on her episodes page at storyworkspodcast.com. Now, here is Selene reading Careless Whistle. Enjoy!
Josh's whistling woke Emery up, though she'd been in a semi-conscious state for much of the 4-hour ride. Scrunched in the passenger seat of his truck, legs curled in a futile attempt at comfort, arms embracing her chest for warmth. These were not the makings of a good night's sleep. Now, Careless Whisper beckoned her from her doze. Emery opened her eyes. The dashboard clock glowed 4:04 a.m. Josh whistled well. He did it with passion, perfectly in tune with the song on the radio, and then added a little soulful twang every few notes. The whistling took on a surreal quality at this hour, especially because she'd never heard him whistle before, not one note. For about the billionth time, she wondered what was going on inside Josh's mind. Apparently, she was not the intuitive person she'd thought she was. Then again, there was no way to know what was going on in her own mind. She was all over the place. She wanted him. She didn't want him. The song was sad enough, but Josh's whistling made it sadder. A perfectly aligned dose of melancholy, as if Wham had hired him to accompany them in a revival mix, if George Michael wasn't dead. It made her want to open the truck door and jump right out onto the highway, just end it in the middle of the road. One of those passing 4 a.m. thoughts. It left faster than she could have acted. The door was heavy, and the pressing wind force would have made her exit difficult. She couldn't look at Josh's face. He was a different person when he drove the truck. Remote, almost to the point of being robotic. She glanced at his sturdy hands gripping the wheel. Rough and calloused from the work he did running security camera cables through crawl spaces, they could also be tender. But not here. Not now. The Capitol shined in the distance. They were en route to rural Virginia, to his family's home, for an annual pig roast. Josh was the chef. Emery didn't eat meat, and she sure didn't want to see a poor slaughtered pig with a pole rammed through his mouth to his ass. But she couldn't resist an invitation any more than she could resist Josh, even now. The song ended. A DJ spoke the usual DJ nonsense. Goosebumps riddled Emery's flesh. She had a blouse on, too loose and flimsy to help. Would you turn the heat on, Josh? That would make me fall asleep. I can drive. No thanks. Rihanna's umbrella came on, and he launched right into it. Impressive. Emery released her seatbelt, reached back into the back seat, and grabbed Josh's heavyweight flannel shirt he wore for outdoor work. Ripped and worn, it would still do the job. She buckled herself back up and draped it over her torso. If only she had something for her face, like a ski mask. The broad highway was nearly empty and slick with recent rain. The truck's tires made a kind of whooshing sound. The road seemed so dark, even though there were tall lights along the sides. It started to rain again. Droplets plopped against the windshield. Not very hard, but there nonetheless. Josh put the wipers on low. Swipe! Gone, but more to come. It was really cold, like they were in a meat locker or something. Was that pig in a meat locker right now? Or was it still alive? Oh my God, was Josh going to kill the pig? She'd met him 2 years ago at a North Shore Animal League fundraiser. They rescued cats together. Once Josh brought an injured bird home. He put it in the bathtub for the night. Emery suggested they sequester the cats, but he insisted that the bird was safe. The bird went through the space between the bottom of the door and the floor, hopping right into the paws of death. Scattered feathers, a bird corpse. Animal instincts were a bitch. It felt like a funeral home in Josh's truck, even with the music blasting. The air had that dead quality to it, that pasty numbness. His flannel kept sliding down to her lap. She kept pulling it up. The song ended. Josh said, "You could put the shirt on, you know. That's why it has sleeves." She unbuckled and obeyed. He was always so logical. The thick sleeves covered her, but they didn't provide the relief she needed. After all, it wasn't the temperature that made her want to jump into the night. The DJ rambled about nothing again. What a profession, to provide inane distraction. Josh, she forced herself to look at him. Not handsome in a movie star way, but utterly, irresistibly masculine. Stop thinking about the pig. He could always read her. She studied his whiskers. So compelling, especially when they bristled against her. Despite her insulated arms, she trembled. She didn't know how to stop thinking about the pig, and she didn't want to. And then there was the thought behind the pig, the one she did want to banish from her mind. The text he'd gotten yesterday from someone named Dana. He'd shrugged it off, said Dana was a guy. Dana wasn't a guy. Emery, his voice frozen. Go back to sleep. The stranger piped on. Josh began a whistle duet with Billy Joel. Maybe the cold in the truck had been him all along.
That was Selene Castrovilla reading her short story, Careless Whistle. Selene is an award-winning nonfiction and fiction author dedicated to uncovering hidden truths about both our nation's history and ourselves. Her children's books about American history are used in classrooms around the country to connect young readers with the hearts and minds of the amazing people who built our nation. Her young adult and women's fiction have been heralded for their unyielding truths and raw emotions. Most recently, she has delved into self-help at the request of fans who love her insights on life. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the New School and a BA in English from New York University. A mother of 2 grown sons, Selene lives on a swan-inhabited Long Island lagoon in a purple house with cats and 1 humongous dog. Learn more at selenecastrovilla.com. Well, Selene, thank you so much for coming on the reading series. Can you tell us about your journey as a writer and how you got started?
Well, back when I was born, and I will not tell you year by year, I promise, don't worry. But I as soon as I held a pencil, I knew that it was what I was meant to use, like a tool for me. Before I even really knew what to do with it, I just felt comfort from it. And I had kind of a turbulent childhood, and writing was the thing that really got me through. I was always composing things in my head, writing them down. When I started writing a novel when I was in 6th grade, a mystery called The Fortunate Corpse. And it unfortunately was never published. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I always knew, but I always studied, writing, but I never really I didn't have the courage to really try to be published. And then cut to when I had my kids, my second son, I wanted to be able to have something to prove to them that I love them, in case you always think of your own mortality when you have kids. So I said, well, I could write a book and dedicate it to them. And that one thought for my children plunged me into writing or trying to get published and really dove in there. And I was hooked and I never looked back. And at that point, it took me a couple of years to get published, but I was all in for the journey.
I love that you're a lifelong writer. I have a similar relationship to writing. And I also love that having your sons launched this journey to becoming a professional. So was your first book one of your children's books then?
Yes, it's called By the Sword. And it's about the Battle of Long Island, which sounds really boring. Actually, I would never have told if you told me I was going to write about history when I was a kid, I would have said, "You're nuts. It's so boring." But as a matter of fact, it's thrilling, especially when you learn about the people. And it's about a guy who didn't want to kill anybody, but then he realized he had to shoot another human being or be killed. And so it's his crisis with conscience. And then it's about how Washington saves all his men after being defeated. And so it's really such an amazing topic. And that was my first book, and it won a bunch of awards. It did really well, and it's still in public. It's still in print.
Wow. How did you come across this historical figure?
Well, it started out when I went to visit a friend who was sick, and he told me he missed Setauket, where he was from. And I said, Setauket sounds so boring. I'm with the boring a lot. And because Setauket is way out on Long Island with farms and corn and stuff. And I'm like, oh, Setauket. And he said, oh, it's very historical there. I'm like, oh, so boring. And he said, no, they had a spy ring. And I said, what? He said, yeah, for George Washington. I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know we were involved with the American Revolution, much less have a spy ring. And then he told me that a woman had hung her petticoats up, and she was a mother, and she was sending signals to Washington spies. And I said, what? I was hooked immediately on that. And I went home and I started Googling away, and I was just like so compelled into it. And I found out the problem with the spy ring was that you couldn't get a lot of cohesive information because unfortunately they were spies, right? So they did not like to give out information. So it was a lot. I found this guy, Benjamin Talmadge, who was the head of the spy ring. And I bought his memoir because I was hoping he'd say something about it. He didn't say something about it because he was protecting people's identities, but he did talk about his experience at the Battle of Long Island. He talked about the crisis of conscience, and he talked about when he was one of the last to get across the East River. He never thought he would make it. They never thought that they would survive, the last people. But he got on the boat, and then he realized he left his horse behind. So he returned and risked his life to save his horse. Which is true. It's a beautiful story. Wow. I knew I had to write that story. I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all because of that, all because of visiting a sick friend.
That's amazing. I love that story. It makes me want to go pick up the book now and learn that piece of our history.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Do your sons, are they aware of the role they had in launching your writing career?
They do. And they used to be kind of jealous of my writing because it did take a lot of the, I have to go sit and write, and they don't like to share. But as they grew up, they really respected it, and they're really proud of me. I'm glad to say.
That's fantastic. Let's fast forward to this story that you just read for us. What inspired Careless Whistle?
It's actually autobiographical. It's actually the same characters that I wrote about in my novel Luna Rising, who are, Luna is me. My name means moon. Selene means moon. So Luna is kind of my name in another way. And the love interest Trip was my boyfriend at the time. Unfortunately, he's passed away. But I had his blessing to write about us, So I wrote that novel, and then I found a whole other side to him after I wrote the novel. So I started writing. Careless Whistle is actually a piece of a novel. I was starting a new novel about us, but it couldn't be the same characters because it was really a different situation. So I never really got to do it because too painful at the time. You write it. I always write things down as they're happening, kind of like half diary, half manuscript. And sometimes I can translate it at that moment, but sometimes I can't. So, and then he passed away, which was really devastating. It still is. He
Mm-hmm.
passed away in October of 2019. Um,
Oh, recently.
so now,
I'm sorry.
yeah, and then and it's been really hard, and the pandemic was very lonely. Um, but so then I pulled it out really because I met you, and you said, "Hey, you got any stories?" I'm like, "I do have this one," and so now I'm thinking about it again, and it's still painful, but I think I can. I'm going to give it another shot again. The whole novel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that, having seen this piece of it that you so generously shared with all of us. Uh, Writing from personal experience, writing from especially pain, and making ourselves vulnerable that way, even in fiction, even when we're translating our experience into fiction, can be one of the toughest things for writers to do.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that process?
it's definitely one of the toughest, if not definitively the toughest thing to do. Um, I kind of liken it to opening a vein and bleeding out. It's really hard. And it's not cathartic like people say, "Oh, it'll make you feel better." No, no, it does not make you feel better. It makes you feel worse. But that said, once you have it all laid out and once you've gone through it all, then you can start processing it because you do need to kind of lay it out on the table, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's necessary, and I think this is part of the human experience. I think stories that come from personal experience are so important to share with people because we all have similar emotions. Humans are much more alike than they're different, and we're especially lately concentrating on differences. But we should concentrate on what makes us all the same because we have so much in common. Why aren't we all loving each other? And I think that a writer's duty is to help humanity by putting this all out there. So when I'm sharing my experience, I'm sharing it with some other person that needs it somehow. They don't may not need it. It's not exactly the same, but it's not how the person needs it. It's just my giving it to them as a gift, and how they get it is how they get it. No two people get it the same way. That's the beauty of literature. That's why I love book groups where
Mm-hmm.
people really get together and talk about stuff. I think that's great. Everyone should discuss literature together. That's what it's all about. So that it's necessary, and I can't get away from it. I just always wind up writing about myself.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
glad I do. I'm glad I do. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it is a gift. You're right. The whatever form our art takes when we put it out there, I see it as a gift as well. And once you put it out there, you release it. So then however
Yeah.
it is received is not up to you and isn't really even a reflection on you or on your experience. So
Right.
why fiction and why not memoir?
Well, I did want to protect my family a little bit. First of all, okay, there's one major thing in terms of the craft of writing. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
the things that happen in Luna Rising are kind of like she's alone. And I really was alone when I was thinking these things. And so I decided to manufacture a voice that spoke with her and had like these full on, like he was kind of her conscience, like Jiminy Cricket. As a matter of fact, she calls him Jiminy because he reminds her of Jiminy Cricket, and then he says, "I'm not a cricket." And so I really have to say that a great moment was when an essay was written about Luna Rising by great writer Steele, and they talked about my technique of using Jiminy, and they compared it to Hamlet using Yorick in Hamlet. Shakespeare using
Wow.
Yorick, alas poor Yorick, and I know it was the biggest thrill. I mean, I adore Shakespeare. Shakespeare is
Yeah.
absolutely my god, and so that was a thrilling moment. That was an interesting thing to do because at first I was writing where she was just alone, and it was basically nonfiction. Um, but first there are things that pan out better if you can fiddle around with them for sure. And then I didn't want my
Mm-hmm.
kids. It's thinly veiled. I obviously admit it, but it's another thing to say this is a memoir, and then then boom, there, suddenly you're running with scissors, it's like, boom, so
Right.
I didn't want to do that to them.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great reason to drop the veil, I guess. A little bit of distance between yourself and, reality and then the
Yeah.
story. Yeah. What in your mind, we've both just agreed that once something is out there, however the reader absorbs it and processes it and makes meaning of it is entirely up to them. So let me ask you, in your mind, what is the story Careless Whistle about?
It's about a woman that's so desperate to be with a man that she's willing to put up any bad behavior. He's, clearly got a lot going on, and she's trying to work it out with him, trying to think about him, but she would rather, instead of considering herself, she'd rather throw herself, commit suicide out of the truck than think of herself. That's a big problem, and that was what I was like at that time. I'd like to think, I know I wouldn't allow that again. I know I wouldn't, but would I allow it in that relationship? It's a different question. I don't know. We attach to people. We are, but we don't want to look at that. Women have this thing, this Cinderella thing. We need this man, and why? Why do we need a man? So that's what it's about. It's really about her lack of looking at herself and just uber focusing on him and just trying to brush it all under the carpet and eat a pig when you're vegan.
Yes. Yeah. The story, it's such a compact story, and yet there's so much here to think about, including some humor, which I really love about it. The, passing 4 a.m. thought, and the ski mask cracked me up. And I feel like there was a third one too, but in such a tight, short story, you give us dense emotional resonance, moments of humor, and a depth of theme. You're really giving us a lot to process and to work with here. How would you define the theme of the piece?
Interesting question. I would say, I can't say it in one word. Let me think about it. I know exactly what I want to say, but it's hard to describe it, which is strange for a writer.
Mm-hmm.
It's about hiding from ourselves. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I love the subtext of the piece with, she pulls the flannel shirt up and it keeps sliding off of her. Mm. And when she finally puts her arms through it, it's only because Josh told her to. And then that ski mask, again, really, really brings that out. Is Josh hiding too?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he's also hiding from himself, and he's hiding from her. So it's two people he's hiding from. Yeah. Yeah. That's what the whole novel will be about, what people hide from themselves, and why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is the story going to come? Where in the arc of the novel do you see this scene?
Very early.
Coming.
Very early. Because the text is the inciting moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. As with so many great short stories, the end is unresolved. We have that ambiguous ending. Emery realizes the coldness in the truck is Josh, but she's still in the truck. She's still on her way to a pig roast as a vegan. And so as a reader, we're left to decide for ourselves what's going to become of Emery and Josh. Do you want the reader to have hope at the end of this story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if they don't, they don't. I mean, it's up to them. But
right.
Yeah,
right.
I hope so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they have hope.
Yes. Yeah. I think I do. the moment of realization that the coldness is from Josh, that in itself is a reason to hope, right? It's like when
Yes,
the eyes open,
exactly.
then we can behave
Yes,
differently in our lives.
exactly. Well
Mm-hmm.
said.
Yeah. So why whistling?
That it's true. It happened.
Uh-huh.
That exact. I mean, I hate to tell you, but almost the whole story is true. I was like, what is he doing? Why is he whistling suddenly? He was so good at it. I'm like, what? Where did this come from? You know?
That's really funny. Write what you know, right?
Yeah. But I always see metaphor in everything. I guess it's just being a writer. Everything immediately. It's almost exhausting to go through life like this. I can't just enjoy anything. I'm like, oh, that's that. I never just relax. Literally, I have to put on a TV show and like force myself to just like, and even then I'm like, oh, that could have been written, and I notice things about that, but
Yes.
I never have any downtime from my mind, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. I know that feeling. Yeah. The whistling creates such a nice irony in the story because Emery is so stuck, in this feeling of cold and analyzing it and thinking and wondering about Josh. And he seems so carefree because people
yeah,
whistle when they don't have a care in the world. So that
yeah,
juxtaposition works very well. And now the songs that you chose to lay in, nothing is ever accidental in fiction or any writing. We
yeah,
have to construct our narrative. So clearly they were carefully chosen. Did you tell me about the thought process, the thinking that went into those songs at those
yeah,
moments and what they mean?
yeah. Well, Careless Whisper has always been a song that just gets me, and I can't even tell you why. Just the idea of this Careless Whisper, it always felt like somebody hurting somebody in the night, and so I was being hurt in the night, kind of like that's exactly it. I just felt it was perfect for the story. So these songs were not the songs he whistled. I really don't remember the songs he whistled. I just remember it happening. I wasn't taking that strong notes, but so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I chose that, and I feel like that's a song that if you grew up at a certain time, it, so you can. It's nice when you can hear a song in your mind while you're listening to a story or reading a story. It's nice that way. It's like sort of provides your own sensory details, and we always hear that da 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 da, and I just felt like that's the perfect tone for it all the way around. And the sad thing about George Michael being dead, like I added that because I thought it was slightly funny in a dark humor way, but also to show that this was a current story and not back when Wham was around.
Mm,
um,
right.
but then Rihanna, well, Rihanna is just ironic, like Rihanna, like why Rihanna? But like, by the way, Rihanna also, she seems like a battered woman to me. I don't know. She has that
Mm,
deadpan voice. She sings, her voice is amazing, but has absolutely no emotion. And it just always makes me feel like someone that's just like been beaten to the point where they're just like gone, where they're just like,
mhm.
and so like, I really, I told you, I think about all this stuff. And umbrella you could stand under my umbrella. It's like about shelter, you know? And that's what I was looking for with him. I wanted shelter. All I wanted was someone to shelter me. Um, I loved
Mhm.
him. I mean, I did love him. I didn't put up with this from anybody else. I loved him, but it was about shelter. So that's why I found that to be ironic to put that song in. And then the stranger was perfect for the end. I mean, it just like
Yes.
he's the straight like it's exactly what we're talking about in the whole story. So and having a duet,
Mhm.
I couldn't, and it has whistling in it. So how perfect to have a whistling duet with Billy Joel.
It is perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And I love how much each of these songs relates to not only the story, but to the arc of the story. And I hope that our listeners who are writers will really take away from that even in a short piece like this, you are creating an arc. There is movement through the piece, and that nothing is ever random or just because. One of the things that um, drew me into this piece so deeply was the subtext, was feeling and processing the meaning that was coming up between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So I love hearing about the songs and why you chose them, what went into each of those. What challenges came up for you as you were writing this, other than, it being emotionally difficult, of course? Were there craft challenges?
Well, when you're in a small confined space, literally in the story, it is a little challenging because you want to be engaging. And when you're in like a really tight place, it doesn't feel like it's going to be engaging. That's not necessarily true, but I don't know. Everybody has faces doubt when they start writing. It's just like this thing. It doesn't go away. It never goes away. But I think that's the proof that you're a writer, because that's like your badge of honor, the doubt. So you have to delve in there, get whatever you can down on the page, and just like, because it's all in the revision anyway. But it was like, oh, in the car, and the inner thoughts. I'm very big on inner thoughts, and it is a challenge because inner thoughts are not the most exciting things. So you have to really find a way to make them live. So that's my personal biggest challenge always, is how to make the inner thoughts kind of fun, fun for the story, in the tone of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think is the biggest challenge, other than the emotional stuff. I think I'm pretty good at editing out, like, I used to be, and when you first start writing, you're always like putting was and, all these horrible things. Was is horrible. I'm pretty good at editing that kind of stuff out by myself, but then at a certain point, you just need someone else's eye to say, like, because you can't really judge your own writing. You just can't. It's like saying, it's like really looking at your baby and saying, oh, those eyes are too close together. You wouldn't do that, So it's the same thing, So you never be afraid to have an editor. An editor is your best friend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And while you were talking about the challenge of having them in a confined space, and I was thinking, yes, they are absolutely in a confined space. But as a reader, I didn't notice it, because there was still so much movement, not only of the sense of the truck traveling and, the changing of the songs, the little interjections from the radio, and then the rain as well, creating a sense of physical travel, but then the emotional arc and the humor pieces, which then made me remember the other funny bit was the bird hopping into the claws of death. And
Did you think that was funny? I didn't find that funny.
No, the line it was instincts are a bitch, or nature's a bitch.
The claws of death. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't find it funny because that happened also, and it was really sad. It was really sad.
Right.
What's really weird?
Death is not funny, but the line at the
You're
end
not
of that
going to believe what happened
is...
this morning. The cats outside killed a bird, and I was like, and I have bells on all of them, and they haven't killed birds in like years, and it was weird that another bird died now. I was like, whoa, I gave it a little funeral, put it into the water.
Good.
It was sad.
Yeah.
But what did I want to say? Oh, I wanted to say one thing that's pretty crucial about writing. It doesn't ever all come out together. Like, you always have to take it in pieces. So for me, I kind of get down dialogue, very bare, like caveman writing, like, me want this, and then I do I do a sensory detail thought. Like, I said, what could be in here sensory? And I kind of make a list I make a list of all the things that could be. You can't use everything, but then you pick and choose. So I do that for every scene I write anywhere, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And then I, of course, make sure it was really there in nonfiction. But, so, like, for example, the lights on the highway, I wanted just a little glimpse of light, that sort of hope, and the windshield wipers whooshing, I and the truck moving. I added that after. I said, well, let's have some movement. And then you feel like you're out of the truck for a moment. You're looking out the windows, So.
Right. Yeah. Wow. More great craft tips. Yeah, I'm thinking, ooh, now the next scene I write, I've got to sit down and make a list
It's
of
really fun.
sensory
It's
details in
fun
there.
to do that. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is fun. Yeah. When did you know you were satisfied with the story? When did it feel like it all came together?
Well, something about it was actually something you said about tying it together more. Um, I like that because it suddenly somehow felt satisfying. It just clicked. Like, okay, it's sort of like belting a seatbelt, like, which is a weird analogy with a truck, but I felt like, okay, I'm buckled in now. Like, I felt like good to go, ready to go. I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
exact moment. It was just like, oh, and it was like a relief in a way. Like, okay, this now I can go to the next one. The
Mm-hmm.
next. I write
Mm-hmm.
scene by scene always. Like, whether no matter what I'm writing, I take it scene. Bird by bird, the book. So
Right.
I do take it bird by bird. With I do write enough to. I make sure I write enough to fill a 1-inch picture frame every day. But when it comes to scenes,
Yeah.
I take it scene by scene, and I'm kind of fanatical about it. Like some people, when it comes to a larger piece, they'll just write and write and write a whole draft. I do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I know they say not to do this, but I can't. I edit and edit and edit till it shines as well as it can. Then, because you never know, things change. But that's how I operate. I could not stand the thought of going over a whole novel like just raw. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
polished again, and then you go through it again. But so when people ask me how many drafts do I do, I'm like, I have no idea. I just keep doing them as I do it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I know. I like to tell my students and clients they need at least 4 drafts, and then I add in, asterisks. And by the way, each one of those drafts might have sub
Oh
drafts,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you could be looking at 10 or 12
yeah.
by the time it's done. But 4 shocks people.
Oh,
So,
yeah, but you have to love the process, or don't do it. There's no other reason to
oh,
do it except if you
absolutely.
love it.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Wow. So this story is a short story. It functions very well as a short story. Do you see yourself changing it in any way, expanding it for the novel, or do you think it will kind of slip in this current form?
I think
And
it'll
that's
change a
maybe an
little bit
unfair
because
question, but
no, I actually was thinking about that. I would have to change it a little bit regarding the text because we'd already know about the text, so the text, I could just say the text. It's not a huge change. The text from Dana. That's it. And then he said, and he did do that.
Mhm.
I don't understand. Well, Dana tries to act like Dana's a guy. Come on. I love when they act like
Right.
we're an idiot or something. It's like, what are you doing? I'm not a fool here. But yeah,
Hmm.
he says that in that song, something about not being a fool in the Careless Whisper. See that? I hear it in my head
Hmm.
now. But yeah,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I'm not going to change it much. I really like it. I think because I already knew, like I knew the scene before already, and I think it plays in really nicely with it. So this is
Hmm.
only one I really had written. I had ideas written down for the beginning, but yeah, I think it'll work really nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as I read through this at the end, I thought, well, mentioning the text at the end, that is pretty clear cut, but I felt like I could still fall on the side of deciding Emery was just paranoid,
Hmm.
or I could decide that Josh had absolutely cheated on her. Um,
Right.
do you think it's fair for a reader to wonder about that and to maybe, think it's Emery with the problem?
I
Or,
mean, I like that when people look, it doesn't bother me. I think it's very interesting. I love hearing what people think about my writing. I love it. So I don't give it's whatever you want it to be. That's my answer.
Mhm,
It's whatever you
mhm,
want. And I had a problem with, I ran into an editor once who we did have an argument about it because he said, when you write a story, you're taking the reader in a car and you're telling them what to see, what they're seeing. And I said, No, you're taking them in the car, and they get to look out the window whatever they want to see. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a difference in opinion, but I don't feel like I have to have that iron hand down on what you have to think. No, that's the joy of literature. And certainly, I mean, I got that
Right.
joy when I was in school. Again, Macbeth was like so important to me. And I see Macbeth much differently than a lot of people see it. I don't see it as like hopeful or anything, don't get me wrong, but I see the grace in it. I mean, there's that quote about the grace, and yet grace must still look so. And I have that on my stairs, going up my stairs, and chalk.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see things. I also think it's an amazing love story. Like they loved each other, those two, like
Mm-hmm.
too much, you know. Very dysfunctional relationship. Maybe that's why I got such dysfunctional relationships, because I was taking Macbeth as a guide, you know.
Oh no, Macbeth, the guide to romance.
I'm no Lady
Good
Macbeth.
thing we aren't in a theater right now.
I'm no Lady Macbeth, but my ex-husband did give me the name when, you know, when we were married. When we first got married, that's when the internet all started. So on AOL, he gave me the name Lady Macbeth, and I'm like, that is not a good sign for a husband to give a wife. But he didn't really. He was not. He didn't know Shakespeare. He just knew I loved Shakespeare. He just knew I loved Macbeth. So, but it's really
Sure.
not a good sign for the
No.
relationship.
No. No, not so much. Oh, my. You write in many different genres, children and adult. What leads you to explore so many different areas of life and fiction and nonfiction and
Yeah. Uh, it's all humanity, and that's what I care about. I care about humanity, and I want to know why people hurt each other. And I know we can never really find that out, but maybe people will think about that when, you know, why do I hurt someone, and why am I allowing myself to be hurt? You know, that's really what it's all about. And I think that's what Shakespeare was trying to get at too. To me, you know, we can't ask him, but I don't know, but that's why I can't be limited by one thing. I just write whatever I feel, what I feel. I feel a lot. I feel for all of humanity. And honestly, it's the same thing whether I write about Benjamin Talmadge in 1776 or I write about myself in my kitchen. We're human. We're going through the same things. You know, he went to save his
Mhm.
horse's life. I would totally do that too. You know, I love animals so much. So it's about that human quality. It's life is not really electronics and this and that and cars. Life is about us, flesh and blood. So I don't think it's so different to write these different genres. And I really wish
Mhm.
that people didn't fine tune it so much. I mean, adults love my history books, because my history books are not boring. Like, I'm not saying I would never call out anybody as being boring, but sometimes they're kind of scholarly. And that's not the most fun to read, you
Mhm.
know? And so mine are so compelling, but nonfiction. You know, it's narrative nonfiction as Truman Capote created it, you know? And it's fun, and adults love it too, and they're learning from it too. And I think it's almost, I kind of get annoyed, like, because when you say it's a children's book, they're like, what is it, like, you know, Cat in the Hat. By the way, Cat in the Hat is actually a masterpiece and must have been very hard to write, but it's not for that
Mhm.
level. It's really an upper level, and adults enjoy them too, you know. So
Mhm.
so I
Mhm.
don't think there's that much of a difference in anything, but I see things differently than the world. I recognize that.
Well, I'm in your camp. I'll come hang out with you. I've always said that writing
Exactly.
is all about exploring what it means to be human. And I want to tell you, when I was in junior high, I had to take the standard history course, and I would become very engaged with all of the stories of what happened, who the players were, and
Mm,
imagining the world in my head and bringing it all to life. But then I would take the test, and the test would want me to give a proper date,
yeah.
identify names, do place names, and none of it was about the story of
Yeah.
the experience of what that event must have been like. And so my test grades were very average.
Yes.
But if he had asked me about what happened, I could have told him the whole story, you
Exactly.
know?
It's terrible. Then they wonder why people
Yeah.
hate school. Like, people get completely turned off. Like, we can't engage with a date. the date is important only because the people did it on that day. Why did they do it? What were their motivations? What did they feel like doing it? That's the interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That mother hanging out petticoats to signal
Yeah.
spies is fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's real history. That's how life is lived in these incredible turbulent times.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's and I think school could really just knock the fun out of books sometimes for people, and they give them tests. So I can't remember where I saw it, but there was a test question about one of my books, right? So I answered it wrong. It was my own.
There you go. Case in point, right?
Crazy.
Yes. It was probably a date.
I don't remember. No, it was a question about
question.
what does the author mean on something I'm telling you, and I got it wrong. I'm like, well, I guess I don't really. I mean, come on. And that's an unfair question. Like, I don't think we should ask what the author means. It's what do you want it to mean? That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like they're taking all the fun out of reading. Not everybody. I'm sure things have gotten better. But when I was a kid, luckily my teacher that taught me Macbeth was amazing and she made us all memorize the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy. And she pretended she was Lady Macbeth, and so she made Shakespeare come alive for me. And I really owe her. I think I owe her everything. I wish I could talk to her. Unfortunately, she passed away, but she really changed my life.
Yeah, I'm often telling my writing students that they need to think about what they want their reader to feel in a moment. And I love how you're emphasizing the flip side of that coin is that a reader is going to feel whatever they feel through their lens and through their personal experiences and everything that they bring to the text. When I was in right after college, I had an internship at the Playwright Center, and at the end of it, the interns got to have one of their scenes read by the actors. They're doing this production at the Playwright Center. And I had written a monologue that I always read as very reflective in a poignant way, and this actor read it as angry.
Huh.
And it was such a shock to me to hear it with anger in this performance, and also such a great lesson to see somebody else's take on it, to see it come alive in a totally different way. I think that's so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. Yeah. But I do want them to feel, I want them to feel satisfied. Whatever they get out of it, I hope it's a satisfaction, but also a hunger for more, so they can continue their own journey, that I've given them some sort of nourishment for their thoughtful journey in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of nourishment for a thoughtful journey in Careless Whistle and everything you write. That's fantastic. Thank you again for coming on the StoryWorks reading series and sharing your story and your time with us. And where can our listeners find you, Selene?
Well, I am on Instagram. It's Selene Castrovilla, at Selene Castrovilla. I am on Facebook. I have a page, an author page, also Selene Castrovilla. And Twitter is S Castrovilla, because my name is too long for the complete name to be on Twitter. And I just started a YouTube channel. This is very exciting. I'm going to be putting different conversations about my writing, behind the book, kind of how I wrote them. And I'm going to be starting off with Revolutionary Friends, which is about Marquis de Lafayette and George Washington, because the 4th of July is coming and everything. So I thought I'd do a couple of patriotic things first. And then my website, selenecastrovilla.com. I write back to whoever writes to me. I always write back, whether they're happy or not happy, but I hope they're happy.
Excellent. And we will link to your website in the show notes as well. So if anyone missed that or isn't sure how to spell it, just head over to storyworkspodcast.com, check out Selene's episode and the link to her website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. Loved it.
If you're listening to this podcast, you are probably a writer. I am open for submissions and I want to see your best prose right now. I am taking both fiction and creative nonfiction. You can read the guidelines and submit your work at storyworkspodcast.com/submit. What are you waiting for? It's time to see your stories published and sit on the other side of this microphone from me. Have a conversation about your storycraft.